wanted. The desert sun was unforgiving, the silence broken only by the occasional hum of distant helicopters. Private First Class Emma Hayes adjusted her cap, her nerves taut but hidden beneath the surface. She was used to being overlooked, the junior soldier on a base full of veterans and decorated officers. Her duty was clear: check credentials, keep watch, and remain invisible. That was until the black SUV pulled up, dust swirling around its tires as it rolled to a stop. The tinted window slid down, revealing a man with sharp eyes, a square jaw, and a presence that seemed to weigh heavier than his uniform. His badge identified him as Commander Jonathan Rourke, Navy SEAL, a name whispered with reverence among the ranks. Emma snapped to attention, heart pounding. Before she could salute, he stepped out, boots striking the ground with quiet authority. And then it happened. He stopped directly in front of her, his gaze piercing yet calm, and to her astonishment, he raised his hand first, offering her a crisp salute. Her breath caught. Commanders didn't salute privates first. It was unthinkable, a reversal of protocol that left her stunned. She returned the salute, her hand trembling slightly. "Private Hayes," he said, his voice low but steady, "you stood your post when no one else wanted it. That matters more than you realize." Emma blinked, caught between confusion and curiosity. "Sir, I'm just following orders." His lips curved faintly, though not quite into a smile. "That's exactly why." He leaned in slightly, lowering his tone. "Do not underestimate the power of quiet duty. Eyes are always watching, even when you think you're invisible." She felt a chill run through her despite the heat. Why would a SEAL commander notice her? Before she could ask, another vehicle approached, this one with shattered windows and frantic shouting inside. A soldier staggered out, blood on his sleeve, gasping for breath. "Incoming intel. Urgent. They know about the convoy." Commander Rourke snapped his head toward him, then back to Emma. "Gate duty's over for you. You're with me now." Her heart thundered. "Sir? I'm not cleared." "You are now," he cut in, his tone like steel. "You're either at this gate, or you're standing at mine. Which one is it going to be?" Emma swallowed hard, adrenaline flooding her veins. She didn't know what he saw in her, why she was suddenly pulled into something far beyond her station. But she nodded, her voice firmer than she felt. "With you, sir." "Good," he said, a spark of approval in his eyes. "Then stay sharp. Everything changes today." The horizon rumbled with the sound of helicopters lifting off, their blades chopping the air. Dust rose around them as the commander gestured for her to follow. She hesitated for just a heartbeat, glancing back at the gate that had been her world only minutes ago. Then she stepped forward, stepping into something she didn't yet understand. Something that already felt bigger than herself. The commander moved with the confidence of a man who'd walked through fire, but Emma's instincts told her this wasn't just another mission. He hadn't saluted her first out of courtesy. It was a signal, a recognition, perhaps even a warning. And as the roar of the engines grew louder, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay ahead would test her in ways no training manual had ever prepared her for. Emma hurried after Commander Rourke, her boots crunching over gravel as she tried to match his pace. Soldiers turned their heads as they passed, some whispering, others frowning at the sight of a private trailing directly behind a SEAL commander. It didn't matter. Rourke didn't look back, and Emma didn't dare slow down. The closer they drew to the helipad, the stronger the vibrations in the air grew until the noise pressed against her skull. "Get in!" Rourke shouted over the din, motioning to the side of the Black Hawk as its rotors churned a hurricane of dust around them. Emma hesitated only a second before pulling herself up, her heart hammering as the door slammed shut behind her. Inside, the helicopter smelled of oil and gunmetal. SEALs sat strapped in, weapons cradled across their knees, their faces unreadable beneath goggles and gear. Emma kept her hands on her lap, trying to steady them, but she could feel the weight of their stares. A private among them was out of place. Wrong. Yet no one said a word. Not when Commander Rourke dropped into the seat across from her, his expression giving nothing away. The helicopter lurched into the sky, and Emma's stomach twisted as the base shrank below them. The roar of the engine drowned out most thought, but her mind replayed his words at the gate. "Everything changes today." What did that mean? After several long minutes, Rourke leaned forward, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the rotor wash. "You've been stationed here for 6 months. You think nobody notices you. That's not true. We watch everyone. Hayes. And you. You see details others overlook. Her mouth went dry. Sir, with respect. I don't understand. I'm just. You saw the convoy papers 3 days ago, he interrupted, his eyes narrowing. Didn't you? Emma's breath caught. She had seen them, stacked incorrectly in a file at the security desk. A small thing, but she'd thought it odd that the convoy route was left out in the open. She'd mentioned it quietly to a corporal, but he'd brushed her off. She hadn't pushed it further. How did you? You hesitated before answering, Rourke said, cutting her off again. That means you did see them. Which means you're the one person who'll recognize if those documents were tampered with. Emma's throat tightened. Sir, I'm not trained for intelligence work. I don't even. You don't need to be trained. You just need to trust what you see. His tone was final, unyielding. That convoy is carrying more than supplies. If the enemy knows the route, every life in that column is at risk. And we don't have time to shuffle through analysts who won't step foot outside their offices. We need you. The helicopter dipped sharply, wind screaming against its frame. Emma gripped the seat, her knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her that this wasn't her place. She was a gate guard, nothing more. But beneath the fear, something stirred, an ember of resolve, fragile but real. Sir, she said softly, forcing the words through her dry mouth, if I'm going with you, then I'll do whatever I can. Rourke's gaze held hers for a beat longer. Then he gave a single nod. That's all I needed to hear. The helicopter banked hard to the east, the horizon shifting to reveal a vast stretch of desert. Somewhere out there, the convoy rumbled forward, blind to the danger closing in. Emma's chest tightened at the thought. One of the SEALs leaned over toward Rourke, speaking through the headset. We've got chatter on the comms, Commander. Looks like a hit team's already moving. Rourke's jaw flexed. Then we intercept before they make contact. He turned back to Emma. You're going to sit beside me. Eyes open. When we land, I want you to look at their gear, their intel, anything you can. Tell me if it matches what you saw back at the gate. Emma nodded, though her stomach churned. She wasn't sure how much use she could be, but the thought of letting them down, or worse, letting the convoy fall, was unbearable. The SEAL beside her adjusted his weapon, his voice gruff as he spoke for the first time. Don't freeze up, Private. Out here, hesitation gets people killed. Emma swallowed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I won't freeze. The words surprised her with their steadiness. The soldier gave a small grunt, almost approving, before turning back to his preparations. The helicopter began its descent, the ground below rushing closer. Emma's pulse quickened with every passing second. She had never been this far from base, never felt the raw edge of combat waiting just beyond the doors. The roar grew deafening, the vibration rattling her bones. Then with a final jolt, they touched down in a plume of dust. The doors slid open, and heat and noise flooded in. Rourke was out first, his weapon raised, his movements precise. The SEALs followed in a practiced rhythm, fanning out to secure the perimeter. Emma leapt down last, her boots sinking slightly into the sand. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a possible threat. She clutched her rifle tighter, though her finger trembled near the trigger. Rourke motioned her forward. Stay close. And remember, you're not invisible anymore. They moved swiftly across the dunes, the horizon a blur of shifting gold. In the distance, she could already see it. A trail of dust rising from the convoy, the faint glint of armored vehicles crawling across the desert. But closer still, in the low ridges beyond, she caught movement. Dark shapes darting between rocks, weapons glinting in the sun. Her chest constricted. They were already here. Commander, she whispered, pointing, her voice barely audible over the wind. Left flank, ridge line. Rourke's eyes flicked where she indicated, and for a split second, his jaw tightened. You saw that before anyone else, he muttered. Then louder to his men. Contact left. Move. The world erupted in motion. Gunfire cracked, echoing off the rocks as the SEALs returned fire, precise and deadly. The air filled with grit, smoke, and the sharp stench of gunpowder. Emma dropped low, heart pounding, but her eyes stayed locked on the ridge. Through the haze, she spotted one of the attackers holding something. Papers flapping in the wind, secured under his arm. Her pulse spiked. She knew those markings, that folder. It was the same convoy file she'd seen left at the desk days ago. She gasped, her voice breaking out. "Commander! He's got the route maps." Rourke didn't hesitate. "Point him out." "There, by the boulder," she shouted, raising her hand to mark him. Rourke swung his weapon, barking an order. 2 SEALs broke from cover, flanking fast, cutting through the chaos toward the target. Emma's breath caught as the firefight raged around them, every second stretching into eternity. Emma's pulse roared in her ears as she tracked the man clutching the convoy maps. Bullets whined overhead, kicking sand into her face. She fought the urge to flinch, her focus locking on that single figure scrambling toward the rocks. He knew what he carried: intelligence worth lives, worth blood, and he was desperate to escape with it. Rourke's command cut through the chaos like a blade. "Take him alive." The SEALs moved with lethal precision, fanning out, boxing the man in. He darted left, firing wildly, but every shot missed its mark. Emma could see his panic, the way his movements grew frantic, sloppy. One SEAL tackled him hard, driving him into the sand. The folder spilled open, paper scattering like wounded birds into the wind. Emma's instincts took over. She sprinted from cover, ignoring the burn in her lungs and the staccato of gunfire around her. She dropped to her knees in the sand, snatching page after page before the wind could claim them. Her hands shook, her breath coming fast, but she didn't stop until every scrap was pressed against her chest. "Private!" Rourke's voice boomed, fierce and commanding. "Back to cover now." She ran, clutching the documents as though her heartbeat was inked onto the pages themselves. Sliding into the safety of a shallow ditch, she thrust the maps toward him. Her chest heaved, her face streaked with sweat and grit, but her eyes burned with determination. Rourke took the folder, scanning the torn, dust-streaked maps. His jaw hardened. "These aren't copies. This is the master file. If this had gotten out..." He stopped, looking up at her, his eyes blazing with something that made her pulse skip. "You just saved that convoy." The words hit her harder than any explosion could. She wasn't just the invisible guard at the gate anymore. She had done something that mattered, something that carried weight. But the battle wasn't over. More shots cracked, forcing their heads low. The enemy pressed harder, trying to reclaim what they'd lost. Rourke tore the headset from his helmet and barked into it, calling in coordinates, ordering support fire. The ground shuddered minutes later as Allied gunships thundered across the sky, unleashing a storm of steel and flame on the ridges. The attackers scattered like shadows chased by fire, their lines breaking under the relentless assault. Silence came slowly, settling over the battlefield like a heavy curtain. Smoke curled upward, the acrid scent stinging Emma's throat. She sat back in the sand, chest still heaving, staring at her trembling hands. They didn't feel like the hands of a gate guard anymore. Rourke approached, dust coating his uniform, his face lined with the weight of command. Yet when he stopped in front of her, his eyes softened just slightly. Without a word, he extended his hand. Emma stared at it, startled. Then slowly she reached out, her fingers brushing his before he pulled her up to her feet. "Private Hayes," he said, his voice carrying in the quiet that followed. "Protocol says I salute you first only once. But today..." He straightened, his posture razor-sharp, and raised his hand in salute once more. Emma froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Around them, hardened SEALs watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. A SEAL commander saluting a private. Again. The gesture was no longer protocol. It was respect. Her hand rose almost on its own, meeting his. For the first time in her service, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel unseen. She felt the weight of recognition, of belonging. When their salutes dropped, Rourke leaned closer, his voice meant only for her. "Today, you didn't just follow orders. You proved why we fight, why we survive. Never forget that." She swallowed hard, words tangled in her throat, but she managed a whisper. "Thank you, sir." He gave a faint nod, then turned to rally his men. The SEALs began their withdrawal, some glancing at her with something different now, Acknowledgement, respect earned in fire. Emma walked with them, her boots heavy in the sand, but her steps steadier than ever. The convoy, miles ahead, was safe. The mission, against all odds, had turned because she noticed what others had missed, because she hadn't let herself freeze. As the helicopters thundered back into view, their blades chopping the smoky air, Emma felt the enormity of what had unfolded sink in. She had begun the day stationed at a forgotten gate, invisible, a nameless shadow in uniform. And now she carried with her the memory of a salute that broke protocol, a salute that ignited something inside her she didn't know was there. When they lifted off again, the desert shrinking below, she looked out the window, watching the sun burn low against the horizon. She thought of every morning she'd stood alone at the gate, unseen. She thought of how a single choice, to trust what she saw, to act, had pulled her into a moment that would ripple far beyond herself. Beside her, Commander Rourke sat in silence, his gaze fixed outward, but his presence steady, unshakable. Emma didn't need his words to know what he had meant. She wasn't invisible anymore. The helicopter soared higher, the world below fading into shadow. Emma tightened her grip on her rifle, her eyes sharp, her heart steady. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. She had stepped out from the gate and into history, and there would be no turning back.